Hi, Trey Clark here. In this video, I want to offer a brief review of a book with a somewhat ominous title. The book is entitled The End of Preaching. The End of Preaching. And it's written by the late Reverend Dr. Tom Troger. Among other things, Dr. Troger was an ordained priest as well as a Presbyterian minister, a well respected professor, and a prolific author in the areas of liturgy, hymnody, and preaching. His book, The End of Preaching, is based on his Lyman Beecher lectures at Yale in 2016. And the title of the book is not so much about the termination or end of preaching in that way, but the goal or telos, the purpose of preaching. Specifically, Dr. Troger draws on George Herbert's poem, The Temple, to suggest that praying's the end of preaching. Building on this phrase, praying's the end of preaching, Dr. Troger creates a rich, multi-layered portrait of prayer as the ultimate purpose of preaching. Here, thinking of prayer as a kind of transformative way of being and doing in the world. While the book is primarily geared towards pastors and teachers of preaching, it will also be something that offers valuable insights for laypersons and students of Christian spirituality and worship. I want to offer a brief sketch of some of its chapters. The book is organized into three primary chapters based on selections from George Herbert's poem. In the first chapter, which is entitled The Church's Banquet, after surveying how previous Beecher lectures have understood the purpose of preaching, Dr. Troger proposes that prayer is the goal of preaching. For him, this means, quote, the purpose of preaching is to invite people to a banquet, a feast, a celebratory meal, end quote. To explore the church's rich banquet of prayer, Dr. Troger considers six classical forms of prayer that offer intriguing theological and homiletical insights. And these six classical forms of prayer include adoration, confession, supplication, intercession, thanksgiving, and lament. Now, to be clear, Dr. Troger is not suggesting that sermons should always focus on prayer and their content, but rather he's suggesting that every preacher and listener to sermons should ask, quote, what kind of prayer is awakened by the sermon I preach or hear? What kind of prayer is awakened by the sermon I preach or hear? In the second chapter of the book, The Soul and Paraphrase, Heart and Pilgrimage, that's the title of the second chapter, Dr. Troger aims to demonstrate how prayer encompasses the full range of the human journey before God. For him, preaching that provokes healthy confession leads us to name the reality of brokenness in ourselves and in the world so that we can move toward real change. He holds that preaching should, at least at times, also encourage supplication, since God welcomes our personal needs as well as the needs of the world. In fact, Dr. Troger argues that thoughtful prayer for ourselves can awaken us to the broader human condition and enrich our prayer for other people. In a really refreshing way, he also suggests that intercession should include concern and concrete action on behalf of the, quote, whole creaturely family of God's suffering planet Earth, end quote. He references George Herbert's poem Gratefulness to speak about the call for preaching that cultivates thankful hearts whose pulse is God's praise. It's a wonderful phrase he offers. And then ultimately, Dr. Troger concludes his survey of the repertoire of prayer by examining lament as the end of preaching, thinking here of lament as an essential mode of prayer that helps us to express ourselves to God in the face of loss and grief and despair. The final chapter of the book is entitled Something Understood, and it explores what it means to engage in preaching that deepens the church's experience of being fully known and alive to God. As an antidote to rationalistic forces that constrict our understanding, Dr. Troger briefly explores how science can help us to better discover and delight in the gift of God's creation. He actually contends that, quote, the task of preaching is in part to give witness to how science can awaken, quote, end quote, us to live with wholehearted worship and awe before God. The book comes to a close through affirming the importance of the moral life of the preacher. Dr. Troger suggests that ultimately prayer is both the beginning and the end of preaching. It's really quite a wonderful book. It offers an eloquent, concise, and thought-provoking treatment of preaching as prayer in a very wide-ranging way. As such, it joins a number of books that have focused on the spirituality of preaching, and there's more work that's been done. But this is really one of the finer treatments of that intersection of preaching and prayer. Drawing on previous Beecher lectures, beautiful hymns, and rich poetry from George Herbert, Dr. Troger presents a feast that is worth savoring slowly. He helpfully acknowledges the danger of reducing preaching to matters of technique, which is always a danger. But I do wonder if the book would be enriched through more concrete guidance for active preachers and pastors. For example, as I read his book, I found myself wondering how might an understanding of prayer as the end of preaching affect the pace of weekly sermon preparation, the immense pressure to produce quick results, and the struggle to persevere in the ministry of preaching. These are some of the issues that Dr. Troger has left for others to explore. Still, this is quite a remarkable book, and I highly encourage you to check it out. It offers a powerful invitation for preachers to recover prayer as the source and goal of preaching. Make sure you check it out. Well, thanks so much for watching this video. If you found the video helpful, feel free to like it and share it and subscribe to this channel for more content. Until next time, blessings to you. Thanks for watching.